Hello, and welcome to Dark Echoes, a web series where I explore true crime stories, urban legends, and the paranormal. I'm your host, The Dark Suit, and in this episode we will be visiting 5 of the most haunted places in Montana. The old City Hall building in Anaconda, the Dumas Brothel in Butte, the Silverbow County Courthouse also in Butte, the old Montana Territorial Prison in Deer Lodge, and the Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument, near Crow Agency. So, as always, close the blinds, lock the doors, turn out the lights, and get ready for Dark Echoes. Number 5. The old City Hall building in Anaconda. Construction was completed in 1896, using local craftsmen and materials such as Anaconda granite and Anaconda copper trim. The building housed the city government, fire hall, and police department, until 1900 when the government offices were moved to their current location at the Deer Lodge County Courthouse. The large doors, behind which the fire trucks were housed, are still there, as are the original jail cells. The building now houses the Copper Village Museum and Art Center. The old jail is now the Marcus Daly Historical Society Museum and Archives. Strange happenings have been reported in the building as far back as 1901. An article appearing on page 12 of the Anaconda Standard on Thursday, April 4, 1901, recounts the tale. One night between 12 o'clock midnight and 1 a.m. Officer William Powers was on duty in the jail office located in the basement of the building. As Officer Powers sat alone in the office, he suddenly heard the front door upstairs open and close. He then heard the unmistakable sound of someone walking through the hall and into the courtroom. Powers went upstairs thinking it must be someone looking for the jail, but when he got there, he was met with silence. Finding no one inside, Officer Powers ran to the front door and looked up and down Commercial Avenue and Cedar Street. There was no one to be seen. Powers returned to the basement, sat at his desk and tried to make sense of what just happened. After a few moments, Powers began to go over his nightly paperwork, when he again heard the front door open and close, and then the sound of men's hard-soled shoes walking across the floor and into the courtroom. Powers ran up the stairs as fast as his feet would take him, and again he found nothing. From that night on, every few nights, Powers would hear these same footsteps. The odd thing is, the footsteps were always heard entering the building but never leaving. There was no other way in or out of the building than through the front door, and Powers never was able to find the source of the noises. It wasn't long before other officers began hearing the noises. It was a Tuesday night when Chief of Police Tom O'Brien and Officer Penny Ingalls heard the footsteps. The two rushed to investigate and of course found nothing. A few minutes later the visitor came again. Once more O'Brien and Ingalls ran upstairs, but not a thing was in sight. They awakened Arthur Tomasky, who slept in one of the rooms on the main floor, but they found he had been in bed and asleep for hours. Tomasky dressed and went with the officers back to the jail office. While the three were seated there discussing the mystery, they clearly heard the sound of the front door opening and the footsteps in the police courtroom. The three dashed for the stairs and reached the hall almost before the echo had died away, but no human being was to be seen. An excerpt from the 1901 Anaconda Standard article states, "It is a mystery, deep and dark. The police officers are not prone to be superstitious, but they are at a loss to account for the noises. The matter is attracting some attention in the neighborhood of the City Hall. In the whispering and gossip that is going about the name of John Wold, the man who, in February was brought to jail unconscious, slept like a log for 36 hours and then died in his cell, is mentioned. It seems John Wold was found blackout drunk and taken to the jail to sober up, where he apparently slept for 3 days before succumbing to alcohol poisoning and dying in his cell. Museum staff still report doors locking and unlocking on their own, the feeling of a strong presence in the old courtroom, which is now used for storage, and to this day they still hear the phantom footsteps coming in through the front door, walking down the hall and into the old courtroom. They still go searching for their spectral visitor, but they still haven't found him. There is also the rumor of an early Anaconda firefighter, who fell to his death after accidentally falling from the fire pole. Although this rumor is unconfirmed, could the footsteps heard entering the building be this dedicated fireman still reporting for duty after all these years? It could explain why the footsteps are always heard entering the building but never exiting. Number 4. Butte's Dumas Brothel, built in 1890 by brothers Arthur and Joseph Nadeau. The longest-running house of ill repute in the United States, the Dumas ran continuously for 92 years from 1890 until its closure in 1982. The second floor has several large rooms and suites which were used to entertain the clients who had money, such as politicians, wealthy businessmen and city officials, who wanted to fulfill their sexual desires with a beautiful, well-dressed lady of the night, in a lavish private room. From 1890 to 1943 the basement was used to entertain the minors and less wealthy men. The basement rooms, or cribs, as they were called, were where the less attractive and older prostitutes worked. There were 43 cribs that operated 24 hours a day, in 3 shifts in conjunction with the shifts from the mines. Business boomed at the Dumas until 1943, when the federal government ordered all houses of ill repute to be shut down, in order to prevent the spread of venereal diseases among soldiers during World War II. The basement cribs were shut down, and all the entrances to them were sealed off. Many of the girls left their belongings in the cribs, essentially turning the area into a time capsule. The brothel continued to operate, however, business was conducted more discreetly. The Dumas also saw many deaths and suicides during its long operation. Many prostitutes killed themselves if they had not found a husband by the time they were 30, while others killed themselves when their husband-to-be got cold feet and ran off or died before they were married. A number of these soiled doves, as they were called, also died from a laudanum overdose in an attempt to abort an unwanted pregnancy, and in some cases trying to medicate their emotional pain away. For those who don't know, laudanum is a powerful mixture of opium and alcohol that was used to treat a variety of ailments, but its principal use was as an analgesic and cough suppressant. The life of a working girl was never easy, especially for the ladies working in the basement cribs of the Dumas. The remains of a blood-stained handprint can still be seen on a wall in one of the cribs, that also had a badly damaged door jamb, suggesting a violent entrance was made by someone. This was discovered when the basement crib rooms were reopened. It is likely that a prostitute was killed there, in her crib, by a crazy client, an angry family member, or maybe jealous boyfriend. In 1950 a woman named Eleanor Knott became Madam of the Dumas. She would run the brothel until 1955. On a cold winter's night in 1955 Eleanor packed her suitcase, put on her hat, and sat down to wait for her lover, a Butte businessman. He had promised to leave his wife and come for her. Their plan was to leave Butte and start a new life together. However, it is said that her lover had lost his nerve and never came to pick her up, and sadly, the next morning a friend found Eleanor dead in room 19 at the Dumas. The coroner pronounced her death a suicide by a combination of alcohol and drugs. Dark rumors among friends and those who knew her suggested that something was off. Officials declared her destitute, however friends knew Knott owned jewelry, a red Cadillac, and a brand new Harley-Davidson motorcycle. These items seemed to mysteriously vanish without a trace and were never seen again. No inquest into her death was launched. Ever since then Eleanor's presence has been felt and even seen in the Dumas. A woman who had worked at the Dumas in the 1970s told of a spooky experience. She says, "One night I was alone in the bathroom upstairs at the end of the hall, with the door open. I had a clear view of the hall and the corner stairway. I suddenly saw a woman wearing a hat and carrying a suitcase walk past the bathroom door and descend the stairs. I was so shocked I didn't move until the top of the woman's head disappeared. I hurried down the stairs after her, but there was no sign of the woman. All the doors were locked and barred shut. There is also the story of an artist who was commissioned to paint a mural for the city of Butte. She rented Knott's former apartment to use as a studio. For some reason she felt compelled to paint portrait after portrait of a woman she had never seen before. Was this the spirit of Eleanor trying to make herself known, and if so, is she trying to tell us something? Perhaps that she didn't commit suicide and was instead murdered by her lover or his jealous wife. If Eleanor did take her own life, what happened to her Cadillac car, jewelry and her brand new Harley-Davidson motorcycle? As far as Butte police were concerned, she was just another prostitute who took her own life. Case closed. Another spirit of the Dumas is that of a beautiful young French girl named Sandra, who was a favorite among patrons. Sandra found personal fulfillment in pleasing her many clients and continued to work at the Dumas until she was 61 years old, when she retired. It is said that she loved her job in the Dumas so much that she never left. Sandra was said to be a caring, loving woman, and she seems to have kept that trait, as people have reported being tenderly touched, and their hands being held by a small unseen hand of a friendly woman entity. There are also male entities seen and felt at the Dumas. One male entity was caught in a photo, wearing what appeared to be a miner's outfit, including a bandana. Near the basement door leading to the tunnels that ran through the red light district, another photo caught two apparitions, a male entity with a female entity. The male entity is standing on the right, looking down at the female, who either has a large hairstyle or is possibly wearing a hat. Perhaps they are long-lost lovers, who finally found each other in the afterlife, or could the Dumas still be operating in the spectral realm? Sounds of sobbing, voices and full-body apparitions are still seen to this day. Number 3, the Butte Silver Bow County Courthouse. Historically, the Butte County Courthouse and Jail has always stood on this spot, although the original courthouse was deemed to be too rundown looking for the booming, rich mining town of Butte, so construction on a new, grand courthouse was started in 1910, built on the same lot where the old one stood. It was finished in 1912. Today, the building is used as office space for county government employees and officials. The modern jail was built across the street just east of the building. The building is said to be haunted by the ghost of Miles Fuller, who in October of 1904, was accused of the grisly murder of Henry Gallahan. The two men had been in a feud with each other for quite some time. During the trial, Fuller claimed that Gallahan had laced his flour with powdered glass and his sugar with strychnine. However, witnesses testified it was the other way around. Fuller also stated that the quarrel between him and Gallahan had started when he had stopped Gallahan from molesting a child. But it seems no one believed him. Fuller was seen as a hermit with a sour disposition who always carried a large intimidating knife. The locals openly admitted they were afraid of him. Gallahan's body had been found in a brickyard behind the McKinney School. He had been shot in the head and his throat had been slit from ear to ear. Fuller never admitted his guilt and went to his death claiming his innocence. It was a cloudy morning on May 18, 1906, when Miles Fuller, scared, feeble and wearing his tattered old brown hat, was led from his cell to the galloping gallows outside the courthouse. Invitations had been sent out for Fuller's execution. Hundreds of local people climbed onto the rooftop and walls without an invitation to watch the condemned man take his last breath. Luckily for Fuller, his execution was over very quickly, taking only 2 minutes from the time he entered the yard to when the coroner pronounced him dead. It was the fastest execution in Montana state history. After the execution, no one would volunteer to carry the coffin to the waiting wagon. At the time there was a superstition about being a pallbearer for a condemned man. 2 ministers, 2 city officials and 2 newspaper reporters finally volunteered. As Fuller's casket was placed on the funeral wagon, a loud clap of thunder boomed, startling the crowd. It is said that this was the only clap of thunder heard that day. Many people considered it a bad omen, and even confirmation of Miles Fuller's innocence. Guilty or innocent, soon after his death his ghost started to appear at the Butte Courthouse, jail and jail yard. The primary witness to this haunting was Deputy Sheriff Tom Mulcahy, who had witnessed Fuller's execution and reported several strange occurrences. Mulcahy had kept an invitation to the event, a piece of the hood that was placed over Fuller's head and a section of the hangman's rope as souvenirs. He had come to the conclusion that Fuller's ghost appeared to be drawn to these items after he awoke several times to see a ghostly form coming through his window. Mulcahy's bedroom window was only 30 feet away from where Fuller had been hanged. Mulcahy, like a lot of sheriffs before and after him, would sleep in a room at the county jail. Mulcahy described this ghost as being surrounded by a foggy, dim light. He claimed it would always go for the chest of drawers where he kept the invitation, piece of hood and section of rope from Fuller's hanging. When he would turn on the light, the ghost would vanish out the window. After several incidents, he decided to take his scrapbook and put it under his pillow. One night he was woken by something tugging at the scrapbook under his head. A deputy, who bunked with Mulcahy, had his own encounter with the ghost of Miles Fuller. It seems one night after he had fallen asleep, he was awakened by someone grabbing his neck. When he opened his eyes, he saw what appeared to be a piece of cloth and rope dangling over his face. At the time he had no knowledge of Mulcahy's souvenirs. When the 2 men encountered skepticism about what had happened, Mulcahy offered up his room and bed to anyone who wanted to sleep in it. No one took him up on his offer. It has been 110 years since Miles Fuller was hanged, and countless people have reported seeing his ghost wandering the halls of the Butte Silver Bow County Courthouse. Many people who have had no prior knowledge of Fuller or his execution have described him in great detail. It is said he still appears as he looked on the morning of his execution, wearing his tattered old brown hat and sporting a grizzled beard. The courthouse is also said to be haunted by the ghost of Tony Vettier, who was the last person to be judicially hanged in Butte. He was hanged on October 1, 1926 for a triple homicide that occurred on November 22, 1925. Vettier had murdered 3 people using a shotgun. No motive was ever discovered for the murders. Vettier claimed to have no memory of the murders and acted strangely while in custody. The court declared him sane and he was convicted of the murders and hanged, but not before putting up a fight in his cell. Telling officers, "You can shoot me, but you won't hang me." They finally threw tear gas into his cell and gassed him for 15 minutes, after which he was taken to the gallows and hanged for his crimes. Number 2. The Old Montana Territorial Prison. Construction of the prison began in the spring of 1870 and used only convict labor. It is estimated that the convicts had made over 1.2 million bricks while constructing the very building many of them would call home for the rest of their wretched lives. On July 2, 1871, the prison received its first prisoners. The prison ran for 108 years from 1871 until its closure in 1979, when the human garbage that filled its cells were moved to the new facility 5 miles away. Massive overcrowding and appalling conditions at the facility led to brutal violence and several riots during its tenure. I have covered the 2 most deadly and bloody riots in previous videos on this channel. After the prison's closure in 1979, it was converted into a museum which opened the following year. Visitors and employees have reported many paranormal encounters within the walls of the prison from the first day the facility opened as a museum. Disembodied footsteps and voices are heard echoing through the corridors. The sounds of cell doors slamming in the cell house are also reported. Several EVPs have been recorded in all areas of the prison. visitors and employees have also been physically assaulted by an unseen force. Some have reported being pushed, having their hair pulled, and even being choked by invisible hands. The hole, or solitary confinement, seems to be where the most aggressive spirit or spirits reside. People report being shoved out of the cells and hearing whispering in their ears from a low unintelligible voice. The spirit of Paul "Turkey" Pete Ittner is also said to still reside within his cell at the prison. Ittner was convicted of murder in 1918 and given a life sentence. A beloved inmate by both inmates and prison officials alike, Turkey Pete occupied the same cell for 49 years before passing away in 1967. His funeral was the only one to be paid for and held within the walls of the prison. His cell was converted into a barbershop after his death, and workers claim Pete still occupies the area. I have also covered Turkey Pete in another video on this channel, so make sure to check it out as well if you haven't already. The maximum security area of the prison, which was once the women's prison, is also said to be haunted by several spirits. Though none of the stories there are more sad than that of a woman named Lucy Cornforth. A poor, uneducated and unmarried woman, Lucy was convicted of murdering her 8-year-old daughter, Mary Jane, in 1929. It seems Lucy had an altercation with a neighbor, who filed a complaint against her. Lucy, not understanding the charges against her, thought she was going to spend the rest of her life in prison and decided the only way out was to kill herself. She went and purchased some strychnine, took it home and told her daughter what she planned to do. Lucy mixed the poison with water in a tin cup. As she sat down and began to drink the concoction, she had second thoughts and set the cup down on the table. Her daughter suddenly ran up, grabbed the cup and cried, "I wanna go too," and drank the entire cup of poison. Lucy pleaded guilty to first-degree, premeditated murder. Her lawyer argued that she was intellectually deficient and the judge agreed to a life sentence rather than the death penalty. Lucy would spend the rest of her life in prison and in the Montana State Hospital at Warm Springs. Number 1. The Bighorn Battlefield National Monument, near Crow Agency. The Battle of the Little Bighorn, also known to the Lakota as the Battle of the Greasy Grass, and more commonly known as Custer's Last Stand, took place on June 25 and 26, 1876, near the Little Bighorn River in the eastern part of the Montana Territory, and was the prominent action of the Great Sioux War of 1876. The Lakota, Northern Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes, led by several of their leaders including Crazy Horse, Chief Gall and Red Horse, were inspired by the visions of Chief Sitting Bull and claimed an overwhelming victory against General George Armstrong Custer and his 7th Cavalry. 5 of the 7th Cavalry's 12 companies were completely annihilated. Custer, of course, was killed, along with 2 of his brothers, a nephew and a brother-in-law. 242 soldiers, 16 officers, and 10 civilians were slaughtered and 55 were wounded in the battle. The Native American casualties range between 36 killed and 168 wounded, according to Sitting Bull himself, or 136 killed and 160 wounded according to Red Horse. I'm not going to go into much detail on the battle itself, as this video is about the paranormal happenings at the battlefield. I will likely revisit the Battle of the Little Bighorn in more detail in a later video. According to visitors and employees, the dead are quite restless at the battlefield. Apparently the Crow people knew of the lingering spirits long before anyone else reported any sightings. They would call the superintendent the ghost herder, as he was the one who took down the flag at night, which the Crow believed allowed the spirits to rise from the grave and walk among the living, and when the flag was raised in the morning the dead returned to their graves to rest. Phantom sounds of Indian warriors charging on horseback through the cemetery are reported, as well as cold spots that seemed to spring up from nowhere. Reports of the full-bodied apparitions of soldiers and native warriors engaged in a battle to the death are commonplace. Visitors have reported both hearing and seeing the battle taking place around them while touring the site. One visitor even recalls having a conversation with General Custer himself, although at the time, the man believed he was speaking with a reenactor, but later found that there was no reenactment happening at the time. There is an annual reenactment where a portion of the battle was fought on the anniversary of the battle. Former Custer Battlefield Park Ranger, Mardell Plain Feather, tells of an encounter with two native warrior spirits sitting on their horses silhouetted upon the bluffs. The warriors were on the battlefield, dressed for war, painted, feathers placed in long flowing hair, one wore braids. Both had shields and one had a bow. One lifted himself from the saddle and looked down directly at Mardell. They watched her for a moment before they slowly faded away. Employees report strange encounters inside the stone house, which was built in 1894 as a residence for the site superintendent. It is a two-story building located next to the cemetery entrance. It was later converted to the White Swan Memorial Library, historian's office and conference rooms. The bottom level was used to house bodies waiting for burial in the cemetery. Before becoming a library, it was used as a summer residence for the staff and was left empty during the winter. Paranormal reports inside the stone house are numerous. A woman's figure is seen coming down the stairs and phantom footsteps are heard upstairs when no one is there. During the summer of 1986, a new ranger was staying 2 nights in the upstairs apartment. The very first night he woke up feeling someone sitting at the foot of his bed. He first thought it was his wife, but he soon remembered he was alone. He reached for his gun, which was laying on the nightstand, and saw a shadowy figure move from the foot of the bed. He distinctly saw the torso of a soldier, however the man's head and legs were missing. The apparition walked into the other room and quickly vanished as fast as it had appeared. The reports of activity at the battlefields continue to this day. Every year visitors and employees report ghostly visits, voices, and sightings. It seems virtually every inch of the battlefield is haunted in one way or another. The spirits of the soldiers and Native American warriors killed on the site will likely never rest, being forever tied to the place where they met their end in a violent and bloody clash on that June day so long ago. Thank you for watching. If you would like to watch the videos I mentioned earlier, click the pictures on screen now, or you can find links to them in the description below. Don't forget to thumbs up, comment and subscribe for more videos.